What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Vitamin C's with me, your boy Adam Taylor. As usual, I'm joined by my homie, my compadre, my co-host in crime, Mr. Tim Shields. What's popping, Tim?
Not much, man. Had a very busy weekend. My sister got married on Saturday, which was cool. We had a whole barbecue and everything. And again, the heat wave again. Never escaping this heat, man. It's been crazy here. I know it's been crazy over in the UK too with this heat.
Yeah, I'm hot today, dude. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, you're warm when your feet are sweaty. You're just like,
Oh,
dude. Like, I've had like
it's like
two
the worst
showers.
sensation, man.
I've had two showers today already. I'm like, man, I'm gonna need another one. It's just too. It's not even that hot. It's just it's humid, right? So it's that sticky heat, and that's what I can't deal with. Look, we're gonna talk some more Kevin Durant after the bombshell that got dropped yesterday, following Durant and Joe Tsai meeting up in London. Where was my invite? That's the first question. How can y'all be meeting up in London, not hitting me up to come do the drive and chill with you guys? That I was a little bit offended when I saw it took place in the UK. But before we get into that, make sure you hit that like button, you hit that subscribe button, and you leave a nice comment, and we will be sure to try and get back to you as quick as possible. Right then, dude. So they have a conversation in London. Again, where was my invite? I'm not best thrilled about this. But moving on, Kevin Durant's basically said, look, you either get rid of Marks and Steve Nash, and I'll consider staying, or you trade me. Either way, there's going to be some changes around here. Now, judging by what Joe Tsai tweeted later in the day, basically saying we'll make the decision that's best for the team. I'm happy with Sean Marks and Steve Nash. Like, this means Durant's on his way out, right? So the three teams that Shams reported as being the most significant of interest is the Boston Celtics, the Toronto Raptors, the Miami Heat. And that's where we're at. So first of all, how do you feel about Mr. Durant being like, yo, trade me or blow up the entire like up front office slash coaching structure of the team?
Honestly, to me, I kind of felt like that was a situation where like the Nets couldn't possibly like that was a ridiculous request, right? It's like, okay, either you keep me or you're getting rid of your GM and your coach. And that is shortly before like preseason begins, before you're gonna have to start thinking about, okay, what's the rest of the season gonna look like? So there was just no way that the Nets can meet that offer. Like I think Durant intentionally asked for them to do that because he knew that was a request that they weren't gonna meet. So it's like, hey, you're either going to trade me or you're going to do like this massive overhaul by getting rid of your head coach and getting rid of your GM. And then they're obviously not going to say yes to that. And I'll be honest, I think Joe Tsai coming out and tweeting out like the coach and the GM have my full support. I think that was a dumb decision for him to do that. I understand why he did that, like making a public gesture, but congratulations, you just gave up all of the trade leverage that you have. Like you still have Kevin Durant under 4 years on a deal, but you are now making loud and clear, hey, we are trading him. We have no other choice now. We're trading him, and that's going to make it really difficult for the Nets to get what they're asking for, which apparently is every single thing that a team has to offer. Whatever team they're trading him to, they want every single asset that's left in that trade cupboard.
I mean, you're saying that they've gave up a little bit of leverage, and I can see it, but at the same time, I don't see it because nothing's changed. Durant wants out. Brooklyn know what they want in return. At the end of the day, Kevin Durant is under contract for 4 more years. If Durant wants out, that's all well and good. We'll sit you down and you will not play until we find somewhere for you to go. Now, Kevin Durant is a baller. He as much as everybody dislikes him as a person, he loves to play basketball. Telling Kevin Durant that he's going to sit down for like a season, half a season, to him that's sacrilegious. It's going to drive him nuts. So they're going to play hardball back with him just as much as he's trying to play hardball with them. I don't see Brooklyn changing what their asking price is. They want a star player, a young star player, a rotation player or two, and some draft picks. That's what they want, and that's what they believe they can get. Now, if we go towards the trade deadline and we still haven't seen any movement and nobody's really kicking the tires on a deal that makes sense for both parties, then now maybe you see Brooklyn lower that asking price, and it's instead of it's two rotation players, it might be one plus a young star, or maybe it's two rotation players and some more draft assets without the young star. We might see Brooklyn start to move the goalposts once we get there. But right now, nothing changes, in my opinion. They're still going to want a Jaylen Brown, a Marcus Smart, some draft picks, maybe a Grant Williams. And at which point, that's an overpay. And every team in the league is going to look at Kevin Durant's injury history and be like, I'm not willing to pay that right now.
And I think that's really where it gets tied up too. And we were almost going to record an episode sometime last week because there was some other news that came out. Was an article from longtime Celtics beat writer Steve Bulpett, who had some comments on the Kevin Durant situation. Here's some excerpts specifically talking about how Brooklyn's sort of handled this whole trade situation. I think there's some teams that aren't very happy that when they talk to Brooklyn, it gets in the papers. A related personnel executive of a team other than Boston said this. That doesn't help. I've talked with a couple of teams that are not happy with the rumors that creep out of there through all of this. And here's another excerpt talking about the Celtics in terms of potentially Jaylen Brown going out in a deal to Brooklyn. That's probably why they won't get anything done and why they haven't had any conversations in a while, offered another unnamed source. I don't think they are going to get anything done with Boston. Fast forward a few days, now we've got Shams Charania reporting more information saying that Kevin Durant has a strong relationship with Ime Udoka from their time together in Brooklyn, as well as their time at the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo. So it keeps like coming back to Boston. Now, I don't know if that has to do with the fact that Brooklyn wants him, like Brooklyn wants Jaylen Brown there, or if Kevin Durant really does want to play for the Celtics, or it's just the easiest path for them to get to contention while also getting the most that they can for Kevin Durant. Like it's appeasing both sides. But I'm wondering where Shams is getting the info. Is it coming from the Nets or is it coming from Durant's camp? Because that actually matters.
Yeah, and I'd say it's a bit of both, right? And what I will say is the thing that I found the most interesting is how Shams basically made sure to put the last paragraph of his report, because it was quite a lengthy report, the very last paragraph, the mic drop, the closing statement of his argument, that's where he chose to discuss Kevin Durant's relationship with Ime Udoka. It wasn't buried within the text. It was literally the final thing you read before the end of the article. And to me, as somebody that writes a bunch, your closing paragraph is usually, it's either to summarize everything or it's to put that cherry on top of the cake. And why was it only Durant's relationship with Udoka that was touched on? Why wasn't there anything about Durant's relationship with Eric Spoelstra? Why wasn't there anything about him and Nick Nurse or he's wanting to play alongside somebody like Scotty Barnes? That actual segment made me question whether or not Boston is actually at the forefront of this kind of wish list. And if it is coming from a Kevin Durant camp, then maybe he is pushing to go towards Boston, because why else would you close the entire report with that? Why wouldn't it be further up and then you summarize at the end? So that was an interesting segment to me. I find that really interesting you ended with that. I also think that regardless of where these discussions are coming from, and I think Bulpett hit the nail on the head, teams don't want to keep having these conversations and then getting disgruntled stars, because all Brooklyn are doing are they're taking these phone calls, feeding it back out to the media and seeing which of the star players they wouldn't mind taking back starts to make a bit of noise about being disgruntled that their name keeps getting floated. And it's funny how Jaylen Brown all of a sudden has found his name just plastered everywhere. You know, if Jaylen Brown, you had those WEI reports where they were like, Jaylen Brown wants a team of his own, blah, blah. Then it's Jaylen Brown, Kendrick Perkins, Jaylen Brown's lost trust in the organization. You know, this was a Danny Ainge pick. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that none of us are privy to. But me personally, I think that Jaylen Brown understands that this is a business. His name probably was mentioned. There was probably an offer. I mean, it's Kevin Durant. But at the same time, from my standpoint right now, when I'm looking at everything KD is doing, the way he's conducting himself, the way he's holding a team to ransom, fire your GM, fire the head coach, and I'll stay. Like that to me doesn't scream a guy that is about the team, that is about winning a championship first. It's very much starting to feel like, hey, LeBron's built his teams over the years. Well, the thing is, LeBron's never forced his way out. Now you're trying to force your way to a new team that's gonna, like, you do that to Boston, you're taking away a huge part of their core that got to the NBA Finals. There's no guarantee you're going to succeed there because the roster is going to look completely different. And there's no guarantee you're going to be happy. So why would you be willing to give up multiple players and draft assets to bring in a guy that's acting the way he's acting right now?
Yeah, and another thing with them potentially moving on from Marks and Nash, there's no guarantee that that makes Kevin Durant happy. Like, he's asking for it now, where he's saying, "I won't demand a trade if you go ahead and get rid of these 2." But that doesn't actually change his chances of staying. Like, you have no idea, like, what the future holds past that. Maybe it makes him happy for, like, 6 months. And then 6 months later, you're back in the same boat where he's like, "All right, I'm actually really not happy. Like, things haven't improved, things haven't changed. I don't wanna be here anymore." So I'm still wondering why exactly he's specifically asking for Nash and Marks to be gone, where, like, a few months ago, he spoke highly of them even after that first round exit. So I don't know. Maybe something changed. Maybe the whole Harden situation, them trading for Simmons, who was essentially dead weight. I don't know if you also heard that they had Ben Simmons in a group chat asking him if he was going to play game 4 against the Celtics, and he left the group chat. That was a whole thing that came out. So maybe you never know. Maybe that whole Simmons situation, trading Harden for Simmons, granted, Harden wanted out, but like you got a guy who was dead weight who didn't add anything. So maybe that left a sour taste in Kevin Durant's mouth. I just don't know anything else outside of this Kyrie Irving stuff that really would drive him to leave this situation. This is a team that he chose, a coach that he chose. They got rid of Kenny Atkinson to make him and Kyrie Irving happy. They went out and they got Nash, a guy who was a former MVP, all-star candidate kind of offensive player. So I really don't know exactly what's making him want to leave, but you definitely have to consider that wherever he goes, this might be something that rears its ugly head at some point. You get it. He's a generational talent in the same vein as LeBron James, but again, that's a guy who also went from team to team, gutting them, building them how he wanted them to build, and then bouncing. So you have to be careful with this.
Ask yourself this. If Durant comes to Boston and Boston don't make it to the NBA Finals this year, maybe they fall short at the second round or the conference finals, do we then see Kevin Durant next summer saying, you need to fire Brad Stevens and Ime Udoka if you don't want me to put in a trade request? Are you nuts, bro? Like, you can't just be like, you need to fire the GM and the head coach if you want to keep me. Because now every GM around the league is going to know they're rolling their dice with their career in that situation by acquiring you, especially when they're acquiring somebody who's 34 with multiple injuries under the books, big time injuries, not some little incidents. And now you're trying to force people's hands by being like, fire the coach, fire the GM. If I'm Brad Stevens and I'm coming into my second year as president of basketball operations, or I'm Udoka in my second year as a head coach, I don't want to have to deal with looking over my shoulder that my star player or one of my 2-star players is going to try and force me out to make himself feel more comfortable next season.
And that's where I think like Kevin Durant is just making these demands because he knows that the Nets won't reach them. Like he knows that they're not going to go out and fire their GM and fire their coach too in one fell swoop just to make him happy. I think this is his way of being like, well, it's either trade me or make these things happen. And so it kind of forces ownership's hand of being like, yeah, we're not going to do that. So you are on the way out, buddy. Pack your bags, pack light. You're going to need it. Like, I feel like that's probably just what's happening. And to be fair, like strategically speaking, if you're trying to force your way out via trade, that's a pretty good way to do it. Like, no, we're not going to fire our GM and our coach just to make you happy. I get he's a generational talent. I wouldn't want to do that either. But I feel like this is just to force Joe Tsai's hand because Joe, I'm sure that he doesn't want to walk away from KD, but now like KD's given him no choice. So again, going back to offers too, because we talked about this a little bit before we hopped on. So the 3 teams that were listed were the Celtics, the Raptors, and the Heat. A few weeks ago, we heard that the Heat were pretty much done with the situation. They were done waiting. They're going to move on with the group that they have. Now, most of the players that would be desired by Brooklyn would be like Bam Adebayo. And he can't be traded to Brooklyn because of Ben Simmons, because of that extension rule that they have. So that makes trade situations with them really complicated. Then you have Toronto, who apparently is taking Scotty Barnes off the table. We talked a little bit about potential offer. Maybe it's OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam. Maybe those are 2 pieces that end up going in any kind of deal for Kevin Durant. That leaves Boston. So again, I'm wondering what these like other offers could be from these other teams that are mentioned, and if they're serious enough that it is going to push Boston to include Jaylen Brown in a deal. Because yeah, any team that's trying to trade for Kevin Durant is going to have to throw all the assets on the table. But if there's not a lot of trade talks, competition, whatever you want to call it, does Boston really have to include Jaylen Brown, or is it going to be a hodgepodge of a ton of other pieces? Like, it's going to be a king's ransom for Kevin Durant, but again, the stuff that's coming out publicly, it just makes me question the whole thing.
I mean, the one thing I've got to remember is, and I keep reminding myself, is that list is Kevin Durant's list. That list is I want Boston, I want Miami, I want Toronto. And obviously, those are three teams that can put pretty enticing packages on the table if Brooklyn were to lower their asking price a little bit. But Kevin Durant doesn't have a say here. He doesn't choose where he goes next. Whichever team can put the best offer on the table is the team that gets Kevin Durant. So that means a New Orleans can come in and be like, hey, we'll give you Brandon Ingram, 4 first-round picks, and take your pick of the rotation, guys. The only name you can't have is Zion. You know, do you want CJ McCollum? We'll give you CJ. What do you want? New Orleans can come in and make a really good package. If you look at a team like Oklahoma, now I doubt they ever do it because they're rebuilding and they're looking good the way they are, but they could come in and throw multiple young guys on the table, multiple draft picks. Then you can look at other teams like, you know, I keep seeing a double star trade with the Lakers floated around where you do AD plus Russ plus 27 and 29 for Kyrie and KD. Now you can say it stinks, but realistically, who's better on that package than Anthony Davis? If you know what I mean? Like, this is the thing, right? There's other teams out there that can come and make an offer that Brooklyn will consider. Now, we might think these offers are trash because, you know, we're talking Jaylen Brown's on the table, but there are other players out there and other draft picks out there that can make it so Kevin Durant doesn't get to go to where he wants. And if I'm Joe Tsai, I do not care where you want to go. I care about where is my biggest return. And that could be a New Orleans. It could be an Anthony Davis. It could be a Siakam and OG plus filler plus picks. There's multiple avenues to take. But Kevin Durant's like wish list of teams to play for, that has no bearing on anything right now. He lost that ability as soon as he put that ultimatum on Joe Tsai's table.
He also lost that ability to even try and negotiate it as soon as he signed that extension. Like, he inked that massive deal. He doesn't have any ability to say, well, I've got 1 year left of my deal, so if you go ahead and send me to freaking Sacramento or something, like, I have the ability to say, screw you guys, I'm gone in the offseason. He doesn't have that flexibility anymore. So you're kind of stuck with what you've got. So
Domantas Sabonis, the Aaron Fox plus filler.
I don't think they would do it just because they just gave up Tyrese.
Yeah, they wouldn't do it, but the point is, like,
there are other teams who have the assets.
Yeah,
exactly,
it could happen.
So, again, it is interesting that Boston keeps coming up in these talks. I'm hoping that they've got something planned. Like, I don't like all of the chatter when it comes to trades where you end up going ahead and, again, you're throwing another guy's name out there. You're throwing Jaylen Brown's name out there in trade talks. Granted, it's not Boston pushing this info out there, but I'm sure Brooklyn wouldn't be like leaking this info if it wasn't something that was actually legitimately discussed, even if it was in passing. You know, Boston's not trying to move on from Jaylen Brown. I don't think that's the case. I think it's the fact that Kevin Durant's available, and so you have to consider it. So ultimately, I think we're going to see more and more of this situation try and leak itself out. But I think maybe that we see some of this stuff get accelerated now that they've had this meeting. Like, it's pretty definitive. Like, Kevin Durant is leaving. It's just a matter of whether or not Boston actually goes through with this and what that deal might actually look like. Is it Jaylen Brown plus more players? Is it Jaylen Brown plus a ton of picks? Or is it going to be, you know, that rumored offer that was thrown out there before? Is it going to be Brown and White and a first rounder? Like, who knows?
And we're not going to know. This is the thing. Until that bomb drops where it's like, yo, this trade's happening, this is what the package, it's done. That's when we'll know, right? But I genuinely believe that the longer this drags on, the more Brooklyn are going to have to lower their asking price. The same thing happened with James Harden, right? And you end up with Ben Simmons. And I mean, Ben Simmons and Maya Jama broke up yesterday. So Ben Simmons is either going to be, and I mean, there's a bunch of English people right now, like, thank God she's single. But Ben Simmons is either going to be really fired up to come back and dominate, or he's not going to be interested in playing again. And he might sit for a while he gets his head straight after a breakup. You don't know which way it's going to go. But there's a chance that Ben Simmons isn't ready to go at the start of the season. And now all of a sudden it's Kyrie Irving, Patty Mills, and whoever else they want to put out on the floor. It's going to be a tough one. I think that Brooklyn's resolve is going to be tested. It's going to be a waiting game here. But there are other teams that need to make moves that are waiting on this to happen. And the longer it takes, the more free agents there are floating around. And it's just putting everything else on ice. So as a basketball fan, as somebody that enjoys the drama of the offseason, I would like to see this come to a conclusion soon.
Just rip the Band-Aid off. Just get
it done, bro. Get it done. With that said, you've been watching the Vitamin C's. We'll be back later this week. I'm your boy, Adam Taylor. This is my boy, Mr. Tim Shields. And we'll be back shortly. Peace.
Cheers.